I sat in my favorite chair by the window, sipping my tea and watching the evening shadows fall across Maple Street. At 72, I had learned to appreciate those quiet moments when the house belonged to me alone, when no one was fussing around with on duty health questions or judging furniture. My house on Midwest City had always been my fortress, the two-story mansion with a veranda that the late Ralph and I had bought 40 years ago when Brandon was just a boy. Outside the window, the October evening was slowly coming on. The leaves on the old oak trees were turning golden and purple, and I remembered collecting them with my young son for school crafts. At that time, it seemed that there was an eternity of joint autumn walks, winter vacations, and summer vacations ahead. Time has a habit of accelerating imperceptibly, and now my boy has become a grown man with his own family. Now my son is 38, works as a manager in an insurance company, and lives with his wife and son in the suburbs. Quite a successful man, though sometimes I think he's too soft for this world. Brandon has inherited his father's kindness and willingness to compromise, but unlike Ralph, he lacks a firmness of character, especially when it comes to Tiffany. This woman knows how to get what she wants, and apparently she wants a lot. Tiffany came into Brandon's life 5 years ago, a tall blonde with impeccable manicures and a smile that never reaches her eyes. She works in real estate and knows how to sell not only homes, but herself. When my son introduced me to his fiancée, I immediately realized that this girl views our family as an investment. She had a special look in her eye, evaluating, calculating, as if she was mentally calculating the value of every item in the room. But I kept my mouth shut after all. It wasn't my place to choose a life partner for a grown man. Ralph had always said that everyone had to make their own bumps, and parental interference only made things more difficult. Besides, Tiffany had given us Ethan, a wonderful boy who was a light in my not-so-fun old age. I finished my tea and set the cup on the table when I heard the sound of a car pulling up. I looked out the window and saw Tiffany's silver SUV, the expensive car she'd replaced last year, claiming the old one no longer fit her status. My sister-in-law and grandson Ethan, a 6-year-old boy with Brandon's dark hair and lively brown eyes, got out of the car. The child raced toward the porch, and Tiffany followed leisurely, adjusting her white coat and checking her hair in the mirror of her phone. I stood up, smoothed my hair, and headed for the door. My sister-in-law's visits had become more frequent in recent months, and it was alarming. It used to be that she only showed up on holidays or when Brandon needed to go to work, and there was no one to take care of the baby. But now she came almost every week, always with innocent excuses, some to bring groceries, some to check on my health, some to show Ethan something in my old photo albums. I opened the door before they even knocked. "Grandma Ray!" Ethan flew into the hallway and put his arm around my waist. He smelled like baby shampoo and fresh air. "Hi, honey. How was school?" "We studied dinosaurs today. Did you know that a Tyrannosaurus could eat a whole cow at once?" "I can imagine." I stroked his head, enjoying this sincere childlike joy. "I hope you don't plan to follow his example." Ethan laughed and shook his head. "I'm not a dinosaur, although it would be nice to have teeth that big." "Where's Dad?" "He stayed at work." Tiffany entered the house, took off her coat, and hung it on the coat rack as carefully as if she was afraid of breaking the symmetry. "He has an important meeting with clients from Chicago today. I thought we could stop by and see him while he was busy." She hugged me quickly, formally, the way one hugs distant relatives at a funeral. Her perfume was expensive and insistent, with obvious notes of jasmine and something else I couldn't identify. The odor seemed too intense for everyday wear. "Of course, come in. I was just making tea, but I can put fresh tea on." "Don't worry, Rachel. We won't be long." We went into the living room, where I spend most of my time. The room is large, with high ceilings and large windows that let in soft golden light in the evening. The furniture is nice, but not new. The sofa and chairs are covered in faded but good quality covers. The walls are covered with photos from different years, and there's an old piano in the corner where I used to play Brandon lullabies. Ralph always said a house should be a living place filled with memories, not a museum with spotless furniture. Ethan immediately settled down on the rug by the coffee table and began to build something out of imaginary blocks, commenting passionately on his construction. Tiffany sat on the edge of the couch, straightening her back and folding her hands in her lap. She always sat as if she were posing for a photograph in an expensive magazine. Even now, in a simple black blouse and jeans, she looked like she was going to a business meeting. "Rachel, you look beautiful," she said with a smile I'd already learned to recognize. Too wide, too bright. "How are you feeling? No health problems?" "I feel great. At my age, that's quite an accomplishment," I said, settling into my chair. "The doctor at the last checkup even praised my tests." Of course, of course. But still, at 72, you have to be careful. Maybe you should consider a more comfortable place to live. You know, there are wonderful senior residences that provide 24-hour health care, recreational activities. Tiffany, I interrupted her, trying to keep my tone calm. This house is my home. I gave birth and raised my son here, and I spent the best years of my life here with my husband. I'm not going anywhere. She nodded, but I saw her lips tighten for a moment. The gesture betrayed her irritation, though her face remained friendly. "Of course, I didn't mean anything bad. I'm just worried about you. This house is so big and you're all alone here. What if something unexpected happens? Fall down, feel sick? There's no one here to help you. I have neighbors. Mrs. Palmer's lived across the street for 20 years, and we talk regularly. Plus, I have a cell phone and an emergency button." Tiffany shook her head with the look of someone confronted with unreasonable stubbornness. "Rachel, I understand your attachment to this place, but think of Brandon. He worries about you all the time. And what happens when the house needs major repairs? The heating, the plumbing, the roof? It's a huge investment." "Grandma, can I have a cookie?" Ethan intervened, raising his head from his games. I mentally thanked my grandson for the timely interruption of an unpleasant conversation. "Of course, dear. I'll bring it right away." I went into the kitchen, sensing Tiffany scrutinizing the surroundings. I heard her get up from the couch and begin to walk leisurely around the room. From the kitchen, I could hear her footsteps, slow, deliberate. She was definitely considering something. When I returned with a tray containing cups, a teapot, and a plate of oatmeal cookies, she was looking at the family photos on the mantelpiece. "You have so many memories in this house," she remarked, gently touching the frame with our wedding photo. "It must be hard to deal with so much stuff sometimes. The dust, the cleaning. At your age, it must be exhausting." I handed the cookies to Ethan and poured tea into cups. The brew was strong, flavorful. I always buy good tea. It's one of the few luxuries I allow myself. Every single thing here has a story. I don't consider them a burden. Plus, Rosa comes twice a week. She's been helping with the cleaning for years. "Mom, what's that beautiful purse?" Ethan pointed to my red leather bag, which was on the table by the entrance. "It was a gift from Grandpa Ralph," I answered, smiling at the memory. "He bought it for my 25th wedding anniversary. He said the red color matched my hair. I did have reddish hair then, which was now gray with a slight golden tint. Ralph loved bright colors and often gave me red scarves, scarlet lipsticks, or, like that time, this elegant leather purse." Tiffany followed the direction of our gaze and nodded. "Very elegant. Vintage pieces are in vogue right now. It must be worth a lot." There was a note in her voice that made me wary, like she was assessing the potential value of the bag. I knew that tone Tiffany had it every time she saw something of value. Do you use it a lot? She asked, taking a sip of tea. I don't use it much. I take it mostly when I go to the theater or special events. It's too dressy for everyday use. I see, Tiffany nodded thoughtfully. It's a shame that beautiful things like that just sit around most of the time. We continued to drink tea and talk about everyday things. Tiffany asked me how I was feeling, asked about my plans for the next few days, offered to help with the supermarket shopping. But I noticed how her eyes kept returning to the red bag, how she furtively studied the surroundings as if making a mental inventory of the property. Ethan, tell your grandmother about your drawing, Tiffany said as the boy pulled a sheet of paper with a dinosaur on it out of his backpack. As my grandson excitedly explained the details of his art to me, I watched my daughter-in-law out of the corner of my eye. She was sitting, seemingly listening attentively to her son, but I felt that her thoughts were occupied with something else. There was something unnatural, tense in her behavior, as if she was preparing for an important conversation or making a decision. Can I look at the pictures in the album? Ethan asked, finishing his cookies and licking his fingers. Sure, honey. Just wash your hands first. I walked my grandson to the bathroom, and when we returned, Tiffany was already standing by the bookcase, looking at the spines of old volumes. Her fingers glided lightly over the shelves as if she were assessing the condition and value of each book. You have a fine library, she said without turning around. Lots of rare editions. Was Ralph a collector? He just loved to read, I said, sitting Ethan down on the couch and pulling a family album from the bottom shelf of the coffee table. Bought books all his life. A lot of them were inherited from his parents. Tiffany nodded and continued her inspection. She moved to the china cabinet, where the plates and cups from my grandmother's china set, thin Chinese porcelain painted with blue flowers, were on the shelves. I inherited it from Ralph's mother, and she inherited it from her mother, a family heirloom that we only used on special occasions. What an exquisite set, Tiffany said, gently lifting one of the cups. A real antique. Very fragile, I'm sure? Quite. That's why we hardly ever use it. I see. It's just a shame that such beauty is hidden from view most of the time. Though, of course, it's better to keep it than risk breaking it. She put the cup down and went to the window, where my violets, a small collection I'd collected over the years, stood on the windowsill. Some of the plants had been blooming for several months in a row, delighting my eyes with delicate purple and white flowers. Grandma, who's that? Ethan pointed to a picture of little Brandon sitting on Ralph's shoulders. That's your daddy when he was as old as you are now. And that's Grandpa Ralph. Daddy was so little, and Grandpa was big and strong. Yes, he was very strong and kind. He would have loved you very much. We flipped through the pages of the album, and I told my grandson stories about each picture. Tiffany, meanwhile, continued her leisurely tour of the house. She walked through to the dining room, where she stopped at an antique sideboard with silver cutlery. Then she peeked into the kitchen on the pretense that she wanted to help wash the dishes. Rachel, your kitchen is so spacious, came her voice, and the appliances are still in great condition. How old is this stove? About 15, maybe. Ralph bought it just before he died. He wanted me to have a good gas stove. And the refrigerator? About the same age. Tiffany came back into the living room, and I could see that she was mentally calculating something. Her gaze became even more appraising, as if she were taking an inventory of my possessions. Rachel, can I use your bathroom? She asked. Sure, you know where it is. Tiffany went upstairs, and I could hear her heels clicking on the wooden steps. But instead of going straight to the bathroom, she paused in the hallway, judging by the sounds. Then there was the creaking of floorboards. She was clearly walking around the second floor, peering into rooms. Grandma, what took Mom so long? Ethan asked, lifting his head from the album. Probably fixing her hair. Women sometimes need more time in the bathroom, but I knew Tiffany was doing something else entirely. She was exploring the bedrooms, evaluating the furniture, maybe even looking in the closets. The sounds upstairs continued for another 5 minutes before I heard the sound of water running in the bathroom. When Tiffany came downstairs, her face expressed satisfaction, as if she had gotten the information she needed. "It's really cozy upstairs," she said, sitting back down on the couch. "The bedrooms are so spacious, and the view from the window is wonderful." "Yes, I like to wake up and see the old maple trees outside my window, especially in the fall when the leaves are yellowing. Don't you feel lonely in such a big house? 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. It's quite a lot for one person." I felt like the conversation was taking another unpleasant turn. "I'm used to it. Besides, my sister Doris comes up from St. Louis sometimes. She likes to stay in the guest room." Of course. But the upkeep of a house like this, utilities, property taxes, it must cost a lot of money. Tiffany spoke softly, sympathetically, but I sensed a catch in every word she said. It was like she was probing my weaknesses, looking for arguments for some future conversation. "So far, I'm doing fine," I answered briefly. "But what will happen in a few years? Prices for everything are constantly rising. Taxes go up, too. And then there are so many things of value in this house: silver, china, antique furniture. Aren't you afraid of thieves?" "I have a good alarm system." "But still," Tiffany shook her head. "I read the statistics. Older people who live alone are more likely to be victims of crime, especially if they know there are valuables in the house." Ethan closed the album and looked at us. "What are thieves?" he asked. "They are bad people who take other people's things without permission," I explained. "But you have nothing to worry about, dear. Everything is safe at Grandma's house. But if they're bad, why don't the police arrest them?" "The police arrest them when they catch them, but sometimes it's after they've done something bad." Tiffany used the children's questions to further her point. "See, even Ethan realizes you have to be careful. Rachel, I don't want to scare you, but lonely older women do attract the attention of scammers. They can pose as utility workers, social workers, whatever. And if they get into the house and they see all these valuables—" "I don't open the door to strangers," I said firmly. "Of course you don't. But they can be very persuasive. And then there are the medical issues. What if you have an attack? Your heart, your blood pressure. At your age, it can happen suddenly." I could feel the irritation boiling over. Tiffany was methodically pressuring me, using the fears that really do visit any elderly person sometimes. But she was doing it so persistently that her true motives became apparent. "Tiffany, let's be blunt. What's your point?" She acted surprised. "I'm just worried about you. We all are. Brandon often says at home that he's worried about his mom. He thinks— what exactly does he think? That you'd be better off in a special place, where there's medical supervision, where you won't be alone, where you don't have to worry about the safety and upkeep of a big house." "And what would become of my house if I agreed to that idea?" Tiffany paused, as if choosing her words. "Well, it could be sold. The real estate market's pretty good right now. The proceeds would be enough money for many years of living in a nice residence. And the rest?" She shrugged. "The rest would go to Brandon as an inheritance. Sooner or later it would happen anyway. So why not make the transition more smooth? Here it is." Tiffany finally said what had been on her tongue for a long time. "She wants my house and all my possessions while I'm still alive, under the guise of looking out for my well-being." "I see," I said calmly. "And how long have you and Brandon been discussing my future?" "Oh, we're not planning anything for you. We just, sometimes we talk about what would be best for everyone. For you, for us, for Ethan. I mean, the boy's worried about his grandmother, too. She looked at her son, who was peacefully looking at the pictures in a children's book found on the shelf. Ethan, tell Grandma you're worried about her living alone in such a big house, aren't you? The boy raised his head and looked first at his mother, then at me. I don't want Grandma to go anywhere, he said quietly. I like coming here. Tiffany's face darkened for a moment, but she quickly pulled herself together. Of course you do, darling. No one's talking about Grandma going far away. It's just that sometimes people of age need help. But Grandma's doing fine, Ethan said stubbornly. She cooks by herself, she cleans by herself, and her cookies are delicious. From the kid's mouth, it sounded like a judgment on Tiffany's plans. I could barely keep from smiling. Children don't always understand the complexity of adult issues, Tiffany said dryly. Ethan, pack your things. We have to go home. Already? The boy said sadly. And we haven't seen all the pictures yet. Next time we'll finish them. Daddy will soon come home from work, and dinner is not ready. Tiffany got up and began to get ready. Her movements became sharp, businesslike. It was obvious that the conversation was not going the way she had planned. Rachel, think about what I said, she said as she put on her coat. You don't have to make decisions in haste, but you don't want to take too long either. Some things only get harder as you get older. I'll think about it, I answered neutrally. Ethan ran up to me and hugged me tightly. Goodbye, Grandma. I'll come again, okay? Of course, dear. I'll be waiting. I walked them to the door and watched them get into the car. Tiffany started the engine and backed up, like she was in a hurry to get out of my house. But before they were around the corner, I saw her pull out her cell phone and start talking to someone. Back in the living room, I put the cups and plates on the tray. The house seemed especially quiet to me after the children's laughter and adult voices, but it was a good kind of quiet. Quiet, peaceful, my silence. I sat back in my chair and tried to analyze the visit. Tiffany had behaved strangely, even by her standards. Her inspection of the house had been too thorough and candid, and the conversation about moving into the residence had sounded like an ultimatum, albeit wrapped in pretty words about caring. When I returned to the chair after cleaning up the dishes, Ethan was already sitting on the floor with his children's books spread out in front of him. Tiffany was standing by the window looking at something on her phone, and I assumed she was checking messages or making appointments. Her fingers slid quickly across the screen, and her face was as focused as someone who was doing important things. Mom, can I stay with Grandma a little longer? Ethan asked, not lifting his head from the picture book. No, dear. We've already stayed too long. Daddy will be home soon, and I have to make dinner. But we just got here, the boy protested. We've been here for over an hour. That's long enough. Tiffany put the phone back in her purse and looked around the room again, as if she wanted to make sure she hadn't missed anything important. Her attention lingered once more on the china cabinet, then moved to the bookcase, and then to the table by the entrance, where my red bag lay. Ethan, pack your books. We really have to go, she repeated more sternly. The boy reluctantly began to stack the books. I could see that he didn't want to leave. In my house, he always felt free to touch things, flip through photo albums, listen to stories. At Tiffany's house, everything was different. White furniture, glass tables, carpets you couldn't sit on with street shoes. There, he constantly heard, "Don't touch, don't run, sit carefully." Grandma, can I take this book home? He pointed to a thin volume of Russian folk tales with bright illustrations. Of course, dear. Just don't forget to bring it back next time. Rachel, don't spoil him. He has enough books at home, Tiffany interjected. But they are different books, Ethan objected. We don't have the beautiful one about Ivan the Tsarevich. All right, take it, but only one. Ethan clutched the book to his chest and looked at me with grateful eyes. At such moments, he reminded me very much of little Brandon. The same look, the same ability to rejoice in simple things. My son loved those old stories too, and I used to read them to him before bedtime, sitting him on my lap in the same chair where I was sitting now. Tiffany put on her coat and checked the contents of her purse, an expensive leather model she'd bought last month, Brandon had informed me. He talked about his wife's purchases often, perhaps to justify their necessity in his own eyes, or perhaps simply because we had fewer and fewer other topics of conversation. Ethan, come here. We need to say goodbye to Grandma. The boy came to me, and I hugged him, breathing in the smell of children's hair and that special scent of childhood, which is impossible to describe, but which you recognize at once. He was warm from sitting by the radiator for so long and a little sleepy. The house was always cozy and quiet, not like at home, where the TV or music was always on. "Goodbye, Grandma," he said, and pressed himself tightly against me. And then something happened that changed the whole course of events. Ethan leaned in close to my ear and whispered very softly, so that Tiffany couldn't hear, "Grandma, don't open your red bag." I felt a chill run down my spine. The words were spoken with such seriousness that I knew it wasn't child's play. In the boy's voice there was real anxiety, almost fear. "What, darling?" I asked quietly. But Ethan had already pulled away and looked at me significantly, shaking his head. "Ethan, what are you whispering in there?" Tiffany asked, buttoning the buttons of her coat. "Nothing. I was just telling Grandma that I love her." "Of course you do. But now we have to go. Daddy will be waiting for dinner." Tiffany walked over to me and gave me a formal peck on the cheek. Her lips were cold and her touch was fleeting, as if she were performing an unpleasant duty. "Goodbye, Rachel. Think about what we discussed. It's really important." "Goodbye," I said, trying to keep my voice normal. But my mind was racing. What did Ethan's words mean? Why had he warned me about the red bag? And why had he asked me not to open it? I automatically followed my gaze to the table near the entrance, where the purse lay. It looked exactly the same as it always did, neatly closed, with a gold clasp that was slightly worn from time. I walked my guests to the door and watched them get into the car. Tiffany started the engine and said something to Ethan, but I couldn't hear the words through the closed windows. The boy sat in the back seat, wearing his seatbelt, and looked in my direction. When our gazes met, he shook his head slightly, and I knew the warning was serious. The car disappeared around the corner, and I closed the door. The house fell back into its familiar silence, but now it seemed unsettling, filled with unspoken questions. I walked into the living room and sat in my chair, keeping my eyes on the red bag. What could possibly be in it that would cause a 6-year-old to warn me? Ethan isn't the kind of kid who makes up stories. He's a serious boy, sensible beyond his years. If he felt the need to warn me, it means he saw something really important. I tried to remember the last time I opened my bag. It was 3 weeks ago when I went to a concert at the City Philharmonic. At that time, I had brought a program and reading glasses and some money for the intermission. After the concert, the bag returned to its usual place and lay there untouched. Or not untouched. I stood up and slowly walked over to the table. The bag was exactly where I'd left it, but something about its position seemed wrong. I usually put it with the handle against the wall, but now it was turned with the handle facing outward. Maybe I was just remembering wrong, but the feeling that someone had touched the bag wouldn't leave me. I picked it up carefully. The weight seemed normal. There were no extraneous noises when I moved it. The leather was cool and smooth under my fingers. The clasp clicked familiarly when I touched it without opening it. Outwardly, everything looked normal. But Ethan's words echoed in my head. "Don't open your red bag." The tone in which he said it left no doubt that the danger was real. But exactly what kind of danger could come from the bag? And how could a little boy know about it? I returned to the chair, holding the bag in my lap. My fingers reached for the clasp. Curiosity was a natural reaction. But every time I was about to open the lock, I remembered my grandson's worried eyes and his whispers. Perhaps Ethan had seen someone fiddling with the bag. Tiffany had been upstairs long enough. It might have been her time to go down to the living room. But why would she put something in my bag? And what could it be? The thoughts took an increasingly disturbing turn. If Tiffany really wants to get rid of me, to force me to move into a senior residence, she needs a strong argument. What would make a grown son agree to force his mother to move in? Evidence that she has become a danger to herself or others, or that she's doing something inappropriate. I shook my head, banishing the paranoid thoughts. Maybe I'm being too suspicious. Maybe Ethan was just confused or misunderstood something. Kids sometimes put a lot of importance on little things that seem insignificant to adults. But on the other hand, Tiffany's behavior today was really strange. Her inspection of the house, her questioning of valuables, her insistent talk about moving, it all added up to a clear picture. She was clearly up to something. I set the bag back on the table, but now I kept my eyes on her. If there really was something inside, it was bound to come out sooner or later. Tiffany wouldn't just plant anything. She must have a plan to use it against me. It was starting to get dark outside the window. The October day had ended early, and the streetlights were already on, casting uneven circles of light on the sidewalk. I turned on the desk lamp and tried to focus on the usual evening chores, but my gaze kept returning to the red bag. The phone rang, making me wince. Brandon's name popped up on the screen. "Hey, Mom, how are you doing?" "I'm good. How was your meeting?" Not bad. The clients were serious, so I think we're gonna get a contract. Hey, Tiffany says they came by your place today." "Yeah, they came by with Ethan. The boy showed me his drawings. And she also said that you two talked about, well, about your future, about maybe thinking about moving to a better place. So Tiffany's been working her husband over, probably on the way home while Ethan sat in the back seat and couldn't intervene in the conversation." "Brandon, I feel great in my own home. I don't need to move anywhere." "Mom, I understand, but still, at your age, it's better to be safe. What if something unexpected happens? What if you fall or feel sick?" "I have an emergency button, and the neighbors are close by." "But it's not the same as 24-hour medical care. Mom, I'm just worried about you." There was genuine concern in his voice, but I realized that Tiffany was the word for it. She was skillfully playing on her son's parental feelings, presenting her self-serving agenda as concern for my well-being. "Son, I'm not ready to have this conversation. As long as I'm doing fine on my own, there won't be any changes." Brandon sighed. "Okay, Mom, but promise me you'll think about it. Don't make decisions in haste." After we said goodbye, I sat with my phone in my hands for a long time. Tiffany was quick and efficient. First, scouting my house, then processing my husband. What would be the next step? My gaze fell on the red bag again, and I realized that the answer was probably in there. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy head and the feeling that I had been solving some difficult problems all night. The dreams were disturbing and confusing, in which Tiffany was walking around my house with a notebook, writing and taking pictures, and I couldn't stop her, as if I were tied to the chair with invisible ropes. The first thing I did was look at the table by the entrance. The red bag was lying where I'd left it last night. No one had come overnight, nothing had changed, but the unsettling feeling never left me. Ethan's words kept echoing in my head, and the more I thought about them, the more serious they seemed. I made breakfast, oatmeal with raisins and a cup of strong coffee, and sat down at the kitchen table where I could see the living room and the ill-fated bag. Trying to concentrate on the morning news on the radio, I realized I couldn't hear a word of the weather report. My thoughts kept returning to Tiffany's visit yesterday. Now that my emotions had subsided, I could soberly analyze her behavior. There was something unnatural about it from the start. Normally, Tiffany's demeanor was emphatically polite but detached. She fulfilled social obligations, congratulations on holidays, inquiries about her health, bringing Ethan to birthday parties. But she'd done it formally, without any warmth. Yesterday, however, she'd been different, too attentive, too involved. And that home inspection, Tiffany had never shown any interest in my things before. She might have appreciated a new haircut or noted that I looked good, but antique furniture and family heirlooms didn't interest her. And yesterday, she studied each item with the look of an appraiser. I remembered her examining the china set, touching the books in the closet, questioning the age of the appliances. Even the comment about the red bag, probably worth a lot, now seemed suspicious, as if she were taking an inventory of my possessions. And then this conversation about moving into the residence. Tiffany had talked about safety, medical care, convenience, but that wasn't what she was saying. She wanted my home, not in the distant future, like an inheritance, but now, while I was still alive and could sign the necessary papers. After I finished my breakfast, I went into the living room and sat down in my chair. The red bag was still on the table, and I couldn't help feeling that it had changed. Not outwardly. Outwardly, it was business as usual. But something about her presence had become threatening. I tried to remember when Tiffany could get close to her. Most of the time, we sat in the living room, and the bag was in my sight. But there was a time when I went to the kitchen to get tea and cookies. Then Tiffany would get up and walk around the room looking at the pictures. She would also go upstairs to the bathroom and stay there for quite a while. When she came down the stairs, though, she could easily walk to the table. The hallway is just at the foot of the stairs, and if you know where the bag is, you can quickly put something in it, especially if you prepare in advance what you need to hide. But what could it be? And why? The phone rang, interrupting my musings. It was Brandon. "Hey, Mom, how are you feeling?" "I'm fine. What's wrong? You don't usually call this early." "Nothing's wrong. I just wanted to see how you were doing. Did you sleep well? Anything hurt?" There was tension in his voice, like he was reading a list of questions. Brandon, what's going on? You sound like a doctor's office." The son laughed awkwardly. "I'm sorry, Mom. It's just Tiffany said you looked tired yesterday, and we thought, what exactly did you think? That maybe you're having a hard time with the housework, cleaning, cooking, shopping. It's a lot of work at your age. There it is." Tiffany continued her campaign using her son as a leverage point. Last night she probably convinced him that I look bad, that the house is too big for me, that I need constant care. "Son, I'm doing just fine. I have Rose who helps with the cleaning. I have groceries delivered from the supermarket, and I cook for myself with pleasure. But still, Mom, what if something unexpected happens? What if you fall or feel sick at night? I have the emergency button you insisted on buying, and the phone is always there. It's not the same. There are 24-hour nurses in the residence. A doctor comes in every day." "Brandon, stop. I'm not ready for this conversation, and I don't like you and Tiffany discussing my life behind my back." There was an awkward pause. "Mom, we're not discussing. We're just worried, and we want what's best for you. The best for me is to stay in my own home, in the house I shared with your father, where you grew up, where I have memories. But the memories aren't going anywhere. You can take them with you." "Brandon, be honest. Are those your words or Tiffany's?" Another pause, longer. "Mom, it's our mutual opinion. We both think—" "No," I interrupted him. "It's not your opinion. You never said anything like that until you married Tiffany. You used to understand what this house meant to me. People change, Mom. Circumstances change too. You get older, and we have to think about practical things." There was that same insistence in his voice that Tiffany had. It was like he was repeating memorized arguments. What practical things? I asked bluntly. Well, it's expensive to keep a house. Taxes, utilities, repairs. And in a residence, it's all included in one sum. What would happen to the house if I agreed to move? Brandon hesitated. You could sell it, and the money would be used to keep you in the residence. And if there's anything left over, it would be your inheritance, I finished for him. Mom, this isn't about money. It's about your safety and your comfort. Brandon, you sound exactly like a real estate agent. Very convincing, but without any sincerity. Mom, why are you talking to me like that? I'm your son. I love you, and I want you to be happy. There was a touch of resentment in his voice, and for a moment I felt a prick of conscience. Maybe I really am too suspicious. Maybe my son is genuinely worried about my health. But then I remembered Tiffany's inspection of the house yesterday, her questions about valuables, her assessing glances, and what Ethan said about the red bag. Brandon, answer me honestly. Did Tiffany say anything about my bag yesterday? The red bag in the hallway? The bag? He clearly wasn't expecting a question like that. No, I don't recall. What's wrong with it? Nothing. I'm just curious. Mom, you're acting weird. Maybe you should see a doctor. Sometimes in old age, there's nothing wrong with me, I said sharply, and you don't have to blame my issues on my age. Okay, I'm sorry, but think about what we discussed. Don't make decisions in haste. After the conversation was over, I sat with my phone in my hands for a long time. Brandon sounded sincere, but his arguments were too similar to the ones Tiffany had made yesterday. It was as if they had assigned roles beforehand. She would push the practical considerations, and he would push the emotional ones. But it was the question about the doctor that alarmed me the most. Tiffany might have told him to ask about my mental state. If she really had put something in her bag, she could be preparing the ground for accusations of inappropriate behavior. I stood up and walked over to the window. It was a normal weekday outside. Neighbors were leaving for work. School children were walking to the bus stop. The letter carrier was delivering mail. A normal, quiet life. And I sit in my own house and suspect my sister-in-law of some dark schemes. Maybe I really am becoming paranoid. Maybe Tiffany is just genuinely concerned and I'm attributing self-serving motives to her. But then, how do I explain Ethan's warning? A 6-year-old wouldn't warn you about a non-existent danger. He saw or heard something. The phone rang again. This time it was Sister Doris from St. Louis. Rachel, hi, how are you? It's been a while. Doris, I'm so glad you called. I've got this really weird story. Tell me about it. What happened? I told my sister about Tiffany's visit last night, her behavior, the talk about moving into the residence, and Ethan's warning. Doris listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. You know, she said when I finished, this does sound suspicious. I've never trusted that Tiffany girl. She's too correct and calculating. But maybe I'm just prejudiced against her. Rachel, you've been a sensible person your whole life. If something seems weird to you, it is. And as for the bag, maybe we should see what's in there. But Ethan warned me not to open it. Yeah, but the kid might not understand the circumstances. If there really is something in there, it's better to find out sooner than later. After talking to my sister, I felt more confident. Doris had always been a practical person, and if she thought my suspicions were justified, then I wasn't crazy. But the question of the bag still remained. Should I open it or not? And if I did, what to do with whatever might be in it? One thing was certain, Tiffany was up to something. And this call from Brandon was part of her plan. She wants to prove that I'm incapable of living on my own, and she needs a strong argument to do it. The red bag was sitting on the table like a time bomb, and I was beginning to realize that sooner or later I was going to have to find out what was inside. The next 2 days passed relatively quietly. I did the usual household chores, reading, watching TV, talking on the phone with my neighbor, Mrs. Palmer. The red bag remained untouched on the table, but I was constantly aware of its presence, as if an intruder had taken up residence in the house. Thursday morning, as I was watering the violets on the windowsill, the phone rang. It was Tiffany, which was unexpected. She usually only contacted me through Brandon or when I needed to make an appointment. Rachel, good afternoon. How are you feeling? Her voice sounded emphatically cheerful and caring. Hello, Tiffany. I'm fine, thank you. Brandon said you sounded a little tired on the phone yesterday. I thought I'd check in and see how you were doing. That's interesting. So, he and my husband regularly discuss my condition and my conversations. I mentally noted this information. I'm feeling great, no fatigue. Well, that's good. How's the housework going? Doing okay? Do you need any help? I'm doing great. I have Rosa to help with the cleaning, and the rest I do myself. Of course, of course. But still, at your age, you have to take care of yourself. You don't want to overexert yourself. Tiffany spoke softly, but I could hear the same insistence in her voice that I'd heard on Monday. It was like she was gently probing the ground, preparing for the next attack. What about upstairs? Is the roof leaking? It's been raining pretty hard lately. No, it's fine. The roof was repaired 3 years ago. And the heating system? Winter is coming. We need to make sure everything is working properly. Boiler was checked in September. It's fine. Tiffany asked about the house as if she already thought of it as her own and worried about the safety of the property. Every question she asked sounded like she was trying to find problems that could be used as a reason to move. Rachel, have you thought about installing a video surveillance system? Just for security. Single women in big houses like this are often targets for burglars. I have an alarm system, and the neighbors are always alert, but the alarms only go off when someone's already in the house. And video cameras could have deterred intruders beforehand. That's weird. Why is Tiffany suddenly so concerned about my safety? She'd never shown any interest in such matters before. I'll think about it, I said neutrally. That's fine. I was also going to suggest maybe we should do an audit of your valuables, an inventory of jewelry, silver, antiques, for insurance purposes, and in case anything happens. Here it is. Tiffany wants to know exactly what's in the house. Under the guise of insurance concerns, she's trying to get a complete list of my possessions. I already have home and contents insurance. Yeah, but when was it taken out? Antique prices go up all the time. Your stuff is probably worth a lot more than the policy says it is now. It may be, I agreed, not wanting to pursue the subject any further. You know what? I could help you with that. I have an appraiser I know, a very experienced appraiser. He could come down and do a detailed inventory, free of charge, as a favor to the family. Thank you, but that won't be necessary at this time. Tiffany was silent for a moment, and I could feel her disappointment. Okay, she said finally, but if you change your mind, let me know. And in fact, if you need any help, you're welcome. We're family. After the conversation was over, I thought about its content for a long time. Tiffany was definitely on to something. Her interest in the condition of the house, the security system, the inventory of valuables all added up to a clear picture. She was studying the property she planned to get her hands on, and the offer with the appraiser was particularly suspicious. What kind of familiar expert would agree to work for free? Most likely someone who would provide Tiffany with detailed information about the value of my property. That same evening, Brandon called. Hey, Mom, Tiffany said she talked to you today. She's worried about your health. My health is perfectly fine. I don't know what makes her think there's anything to worry about. Well, she's just attentive and caring. Mom, have you thought about that appraiser thing? It's a really smart idea. So Tiffany's already worked her husband over. Now he's going to repeat her suggestions, presenting them as his own ideas. Brandon, why do I need an appraiser? I'm not selling anything. But it's good for insurance. Also, well, sooner or later, I'm going to have all this stuff anyway, and it's better to know their exact value beforehand. For planning purposes, that's it. My son was already talking openly about inheritance as if my death was imminent. After only a week ago, he claimed he was only concerned about my health. Son, I hate to hear such talk. I'm still alive and I'm going to live a long time. Of course, Mom, that's not what I meant. It's just that, well, practical matters are important too. And the sooner it's settled, the easier it'll be later. Later when? Brandon hesitated. Well, when you move into the residence, or, well, when I need you to. He avoided direct words, but the meaning was clear. He and Tiffany were already planning my life and death, dividing the inheritance and discussing the practical details. Brandon, for the last time, I'm not moving anywhere. This is my home, and I will stay in it for the rest of my life. Mom, but what if you get sick? What if you can't live alone anymore? Then I'll hire a nurse, or I'll invite Doris to move in with me, but I won't leave the house. But keeping a house with a nurse will cost a lot of money, much more than the residents. I wonder how Brandon knows so much about caregiver prices. So he and Tiffany have been looking into this as well. It's my money, and I will use it as I see fit. Mom, think rationally. Why spend a lot of money on housekeeping when you can live in a comfortable residence for less? And the savings could be your inheritance. I finished. That's what you're thinking of, isn't it? No, I'm thinking of your comfort and safety. But there was no conviction in his voice. He was repeating learned phrases, and we both knew it. On Friday, Tiffany called again. This time she was interested in my plans for the weekend. Rachel, you're not going anywhere? Family? Friends? No, I'm planning on spending the weekend at home. Why? Why? I just wanted to make sure you were okay, in case something happens and we don't know. If something happens, I'll call you, or I'll use the emergency button. Of course, but still, what if you forget to press the button? Or you don't have time? In old age, sometimes reaction time slows down. More hints of age-related problems. Tiffany was methodically constructing the image of a frail old lady who couldn't take care of herself. Tiffany, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not as old as you're trying to make me out to be. Oh, that's not what I meant. Just caring. Wouldn't you like someone to stop by regularly to see how you're doing? Maybe I could come by a couple times a week, or call at a certain time every day. Daily check-ins. That's what she wants. If I agree, any delay in answering the phone will be cause for panic and an ambulance, and a few incidents like that will be grounds for involuntary hospitalization. Thank you, but that won't be necessary. How could it not be? Rachel, you live alone in a house this big. What if you fall down the stairs? What if you feel sick at night? I have a phone next to my bed and an emergency button around my neck. But what if you pass out? Then no button will help. Tiffany painted one nightmare scenario after another, trying to scare me into agreeing to constant monitoring. But I knew it was a trap. Tiffany, enough. I'm doing fine, and I don't need custody. Custody? Come on, it's not about custody. It's just about reasonable precautions. You know, I read an article about how often the elderly get into trouble just because there's no one around, especially women who live alone. What article? I asked. Oh, medical, from a professional journal. It cited statistics on accidents among elderly people living alone. Very sad numbers. I was pretty sure that article didn't exist. Tiffany was just trying to make her argument sound scientific. Tiffany, I appreciate your concern, but I don't want to continue this conversation. Okay, fine, fine. But promise me you'll think about it. And if you need anything, call me right away, any time of day or night. After that conversation, I was convinced that Tiffany was running an elaborate campaign. She was attacking from multiple angles, through Brandon, through talking to me directly, through creating an atmosphere of anxiety and insecurity. The goal was clear, to make me feel helpless and agree to move. But what bothered me most was the insistence with which she inquired about my plans for the weekend. It was like she wanted to make sure I would be home alone at a certain time. What could that possibly be for? The red bag was still on the table, and I found myself glancing in her direction more and more often. Whatever it had something to do with Tiffany's plans, and I was starting to feel like the time to figure it out was getting closer. Saturday night, the house phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. Hello, is this Mrs. Hunter? A man's voice asked. Yes, I'm listening. This is Detective Morris, Midwest City Police Department. Would you please come up to our station? We have a few questions that concern you. My heart's pounding. What's wrong? I'd rather talk to you in person. It's about your safety. Can you come back tomorrow morning? What exactly is this about? Mrs. Hunter, believe me, it's better to discuss it in person. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock would be fine with you. I said yes, but after I put the phone down, I had a bad feeling. What could the police do? And why now, when Tiffany was taking such an active interest in my plans? My gaze fell on the red bag again, and suddenly everything fell into place. If there really was something in it, then tomorrow's visit to the police might have something to do with it. Perhaps someone had reported suspicious activity in my house, or that I have illegal items in my possession. Tiffany could have called anonymously, saying she was worried about the mental state of her mother-in-law, who was acting strangely, and the police would invite me in for an inspection, and if they found anything compromising, I realized I can't wait any longer. I need to find out what's in the red bag before I go to the police tomorrow. Ethan's warning had been important, but now not knowing could prove even more dangerous. Saturday night dragged on interminably long. I walked around the house trying to do the usual things, but my thoughts kept returning to tomorrow's visit to the police and the red bag. Every time I passed the hallway table, I felt my heartbeat quicken. Around 8 p.m., the phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID. It was Brandon's home phone. Most likely, my son had decided to have another conversation about moving into the residence, taking advantage of a day off to have a long conversation. But when I picked up the phone, I heard a thin child's voice. Grandma, it's Ethan. I was surprised. Grandson rarely called himself. Usually parents dialed the number and handed him the phone. Hi, honey. How are you? Where's Mom and Dad? They're at the store. Mom said they'd be back soon. Grandma, can I tell you something? It's a secret. There was a seriousness in the boy's voice that alarmed me. Ethan is not the kind of child who takes secrets lightly. Sure, honey, tell me. Remember I told you about the red bag? Yeah, I remember. You told me not to open it. Uh-huh. You know why? His voice got really quiet, like the kid was afraid of being overheard. I saw my mom put something in there. My heart beat faster, so my suspicions were right. Tiffany did put something in the bag. What exactly did you see, Ethan? When we came to your house on Monday, Mom said she was going to the bathroom, and I was playing on the floor and I saw her come down the stairs. But she didn't go to your room. She went to the table in the hallway, where your beautiful bag is. And what did she do? She took a little bag out of her pocket. It was white, and she put it in your bag. And then she closed the bag and went to the bathroom. Ethan spoke in a whisper, and I could hear the seriousness in his voice, but also the fear. The child understood that he had witnessed something wrong. Ethan, what was in the bag? I don't know exactly, but I heard my mom on the phone with Aunt Sharon. She said they were bad pills, the kind of pills that make people sick. Sharon was Tiffany's sister who lived in another state. Apparently, her sister-in-law let her in on the plans and discussed the details over the phone. What else did Mom say? She said, Ethan was silent, as if trying to remember the exact words. She said that soon the cops would find bad pills at Grandma's place, and then everyone would realize that Grandma was sick and that Grandma couldn't live alone. So the plan was even more insidious than I'd realized. Tiffany didn't just want to compromise me. She planned to use the police to do it. Drugs in an elderly woman's home would look like a sign of mental illness or senility. Who would believe that a 72-year-old grandmother would knowingly keep drugs? Ethan, you're good for telling me. But why did you decide to call now? Because Mom was on the phone again today. She told Aunt Sharon that tomorrow everything will happen, that the cops would come to Grandma's house and find the bad pills, and then Grandma would be taken to the hospital and she wouldn't be able to live in her house anymore. It all fit. The call from the police, the invitation to come to the station tomorrow morning, it was all part of Tiffany's plan. Perhaps she had reported the suspicious activity in my house herself, presenting it as a concern for the safety of the neighborhood. Grandma, will you open the bag? Ethan asked anxiously. There are definitely some bad pills in there. Mommy put them in there. Yes, honey. I'll open the bag and see what's in there. Aren't you going to get sick from those pills? No, I won't get sick. I'll just look and throw them away. Okay, I'm scared. I don't want my mom to go to jail for bad pills, but I don't want my grandmother to be forced to leave home. My heart ached with pity. The poor child was caught between two fires, love for his mother and the desire to protect his grandmother. He did not understand all the adult intrigues, but instinctively felt that something wrong was happening. Ethan, you are a very brave boy. Thanks to you, I can make things right, and no one will be taken to jail, and Grandma will stay home. Really? Really. But this has to be our secret, okay? Don't tell anyone you called me. Okay, okay. Here comes Mom and Dad. I have to hang up. Okay, sweetie. Good night. Good night, Grandma. I love you. After the conversation ended, I sat still for a while, digesting what I had heard. Ethan had confirmed my worst suspicions. Tiffany had indeed put drugs in my bag, counting on the police to find them and draw the appropriate conclusions about my mental state. It was a devilishly clever plan. Drugs in an elderly woman's house could only be explained in two ways. Either she was dealing them, which is absurd, or she had serious mental problems. In either case, it would be a good reason for compulsory hospitalization and deprivation of legal capacity. And then it was simple. The house would be taken over by a guardian, most likely Brandon. And Brandon was completely under his wife's influence. Tiffany would have access to all of my assets, technically staying clean before the law. I stood up and slowly walked over to the table with the red bag. My hands trembled slightly as I picked it up. Ethan had warned me not to open the bag, but now I understood why. He was afraid I'd accidentally take the drugs or do something with them. The kid was trying to protect me the only way he could. The clasp opened with a quiet click. I looked inside and at first saw the usual contents: handkerchiefs, reading glasses, a small mirror, lipstick. But in the far corner, tucked under the lining, lay a small clear bag of white powder. I pulled it out carefully, being careful not to leave any fingerprints. The bag was professionally sealed, and inside was a fine crystalline powder that could have been cocaine or some other drug. The quantity was small, obviously not for trafficking, but enough for a possession charge. Tiffany had thought of everything in detail. If the police found the bag during a search tomorrow, there would be no way to explain its presence. Who would believe someone would plant drugs on a 72-year-old woman? especially considering Tiffany had probably already set the stage by telling Brandon and possibly the doctors about my strange behavior and age related changes. I examined the bag carefully. It didn't have any identifying marks or labels on it, just the usual drug packaging you might buy on the street. Tiffany, working at a real estate agency, must have run into all sorts of people and could have found a supplier. But what do I do next? If I throw the package away, the police won't find anything tomorrow, and Tiffany will realize her plan has failed. She might try again or come up with something else. And if I left the package where it was, I risked going to jail or a mental hospital. I needed to strategize. Ethan said that Tiffany had discussed the plan with her sister on the phone. So there's evidence of her intentions. But how could I prove she was the one who'd planted the drugs? I sat back in my chair, bag in hand. It was dark outside the window, and the streetlights cast uneven shadows on the living room walls. The house seemed especially quiet, and in that silence I could think clearly. The first order of business was to preserve the evidence. I went to the kitchen and found a clear plastic container into which I carefully placed the package. Then I wrote a detailed description of what Ethan had told me on a piece of paper, including the time and date of the conversation. Then I called Doris's sister. Rachel, what's wrong? You sound worried. I told her everything about Ethan's call, about the drugs we found, about tomorrow's visit to the police. Doris listened in silence, occasionally gasping with indignation. That bitch, she blurted out when I was done. I always knew there was something wrong with her. But to plant drugs? That's a felony. The question is how to prove it. My word isn't enough, and a 6-year-old's testimony isn't going to be taken seriously. What if we record the conversation with her? Try to get her to confess. She's too smart for that. Besides, I have to be at the police station tomorrow morning. There's no time for sneaky maneuvers. Rachel, what if we just go to the police with this package and tell them the truth? Maybe they'll believe it? I doubt it. Tiffany's probably got an alibi. She could say she was worried about my mental state, and that's why she called the police. And I'd look like a paranoid old lady accusing my sister-in-law of mythical crimes. We discussed various options, but they all seemed risky. Doris finally came up with the most sensible solution. Rachel, we need a witness, someone who can confirm that the package was in your bag and you didn't put it there. Maybe we should get a lawyer. Saturday night? Besides, I don't know any lawyers. Then the neighbors. Mrs. Palmer knows you well. She can testify to your normal condition and help with the police. That was a good idea. Eleanor Palmer had lived across the street for 20 years, and we talked regularly. She knew me as a sensible person and could confirm that I had never shown any interest in drugs. Okay, I said. I'll talk to Eleanor tomorrow morning, and then we'll go to the police together. And the bag? I'll take it with me. Let them examine it. At least they'll know what the substance is. And what will you tell the police? The truth, that my sister-in-law planted the drugs to compromise me and make me give up the house. They only have my word against hers, but I have a clear conscience. After talking to Doris, I felt more confident. The plan wasn't perfect, but it was honest. I would tell the truth and hope that the police officers would be perceptive enough to understand the situation. I spent the rest of the evening preparing for tomorrow. I wrote down a detailed timeline of events from Tiffany's Monday visit, prepared copies of the deeds to the house to show that I was the rightful owner and didn't need custody. Before going to bed, I scrutinized the red bag one more time. Tiffany had carefully tucked the bag under the lining so that it wouldn't be visible on a cursory inspection, but that it was sure to be found on a thorough search. She expected the police would be looking specifically for drugs, having received a tip to that effect. Tomorrow it would be clear how well she'd thought out her plan, and whether I could ruin it. I met Sunday morning with a clear head and a clear plan of action. I'd spent a restless night waking up several times and thinking about the day ahead, but by morning the details had all come together. Tiffany had overestimated my naivete and underestimated my determination. Now it was my turn to act. The first thing I did was call Mrs. Palmer. Eleanor was an early beekeeper and was already watering the flowers in her garden at 7 in the morning. "Good morning, Rachel. How are you? You're calling early." "Eleanor, I need your help. Very serious help. Can you come to my place? It's a police matter." "The police? What's wrong? Is something bothering you?" "I'd rather talk to you in person. It's a rather complicated story." Half an hour later, Eleanor was sitting in my living room with a cup of coffee, listening intently to my story. I started with Tiffany's Monday visit and ended with Ethan's call yesterday. Eleanor was a woman of practicality and judgment. At 68, she still had a clear mind and the ability to analyze a situation quickly. "So this snake wants you out of your own house," she summarized when I was done, "and she's willing to plant drugs to do it." God, what people have come to. "The important thing is that I have proof. Here's the bag." I showed her the container of drugs. Eleanor cringed. "That's disgusting. Rachel, are you sure the police will believe your story?" "I don't know, but I have a plan. I'm not just gonna make excuses. I'm gonna go on the offensive." I explained my strategy to Eleanor. Instead of passively defending myself against the charges, I was going to file a criminal complaint myself. Drug planting was a serious offense, and if Tiffany could be proven guilty, she'd be in jail, not me in a mental hospital. "That's smart," Eleanor agreed. "But how do you prove she did it?" "I have Ethan's testimony. He may be a little kid, but he saw his mother put something in my bag." Tiffany also discussed the plan on the phone with her sister. "Maybe the police can get a recording of the conversation." "What if she denies it?" "Then it comes down to my word against hers. But I have the advantage of being a local with an impeccable reputation, and Tiffany has clear motives for such a crime." Eleanor agreed to go with me to the police station as a witness to my normal mental state. We agreed to meet in an hour, and in the meantime, I wanted to prepare some more documents. After my neighbor left, I called Doris in St. Louis. "How's it going? Are you ready for today?" my sister asked. "I am, but I need your help. Can you get here as soon as possible?" Sure. What's wrong?" "I want to have a family meeting. Invite Brandon and Tiffany and lay all the cards on the table. But I need support for that. They can't think I'm some defenseless, lonely old lady." Doris was 3 years younger than me, but looked younger than her 69 years. She had worked as a school principal until her retirement and knew how to talk to people with authority and persuasion. Just the kind of support I needed. "I'll leave in 2 hours. I'll be at your place by tonight." "That's great. In the meantime, I'll go to the police and find out what they want from me." I got a friendly welcome at the station. Detective Morris was a middle-aged man with attentive eyes and quiet manners. He led Eleanor and me into a small office and offered me coffee. "Mrs. Hunter, thank you for coming in. We have some information that may concern your safety. We received an anonymous call reporting that there may be drugs in your home. I didn't show any surprise." "Detective Morris, I know about that call, and I know who made it. I didn't come here as a suspect, but as a victim of a crime." The detective raised his eyebrows. "Explain, please." I told the whole story from the beginning, without omitting a single detail. I showed the bag of drugs, explained how it had ended up in my bag, and gave my thoughts on Tiffany's motives. Eleanor confirmed my reputation as a good neighbor and testified that I'd never shown any signs of mental illness. Detective Morris listened intently, taking notes. When I finished, he asked a few clarifying questions about the timing of the events and how exactly Tiffany could have gotten access to the drugs. "Mrs. Hunter, these are serious charges. Drug planting is a felony, but proving a case like this won't be easy. Do you have any additional evidence?" "I have a witness, My grandson. He saw Tiffany put something in my bag. She also discussed the plan on the phone. Who was she talking to? Her sister, who lives in Denver. Her name is Sharon Clark. The detective wrote the name down. We'll check the phone records, but that could take a while. In the meantime, we'll assume you filed a criminal complaint against you. We'll have the bag of stuff sent to forensics. What about the anonymous call? Can you find out where it came from? We'll try. Although anonymous calls are often made from disposable phones or phone booths, after the police, Eleanor and I drove to her house, where I told her husband Howard. He worked as an accountant for a large firm and was well versed in legal matters. Howard listened to my story and shook his head. Rachel, you need a good lawyer. Even if the police believe your story, Tiffany could sue you for slander. And if they don't, you'll have to prove your innocence. I know that, but first, I want to try to work this out as a family. Maybe if Tiffany realizes her plan has failed, she'll back off. And if she doesn't, then we'll go to court. Doris arrived that evening. She looked determined and ready to fight. She and I spent several hours strategizing about the upcoming conversation with Brandon and Tiffany. Doris offered some important ideas. Rachel, the key is to not let them take the initiative. They're used to you being on the defensive, but now you've got your trump cards and you need to use them. What kind of leverage? First, evidence of the crime. Circumstantial but compelling. Second, Ethan's testimony. Even if the court doesn't accept the kid's testimony, it'll give the family a lot to think about. Third, the police support. They already know about your statement. What if Tiffany tries to deny it? Let her deny it, but she'll know she's under suspicion, and she'll realize her plan didn't work. It'll make her more careful. We decided to invite Brandon and Tiffany over for family dinner Monday night. It was a casual enough event so as not to arouse suspicion, but it also provided an opportunity for a serious conversation. Doris helped me plan the conversation. We decided to start with general questions about the family's plans, then move on to the house and the inheritance, and then bombard them with information about the drugs and the police investigation. The main thing is to control the situation, Doris emphasized. Don't give them a chance to avoid answers or shut down the conversation. It's your house, your rules. And what if they try to leave? Then tell them you've already contacted the police and a lawyer. That'll stop them. Monday morning, I called Brandon. Hey, Mom, how's it going? I'm good. Listen, Aunt Doris is visiting. We'd love to have a family get together. Come over for dinner tonight around 7 now. Sure, Mom. Is there a special occasion? I just want to socialize. We don't get together that often. Brandon agreed, and I realized that tonight would be a pivotal conversation. I had a few hours to make final preparations. Doris helped me prepare dinner, fried chicken and potatoes and a vegetable salad. A simple home-cooked meal that created an atmosphere of family coziness. I wanted the first part of the evening to be casual, relaxed, and then get down to the serious stuff. Are you ready? Doris asked as we set the table. I am. It's time to put an end to this intrigue. At 7:30, I saw Brandon's car pull up in the window. My heart beat faster, but I felt more confident than I had ever felt in days. I had the truth, I had proof, and I had support. Now it was Tiffany's turn to defend herself. I opened the door with a smile that came with some effort. Brandon looked tired after a day at work. Slightly disheveled hair, loosened tie, slight wrinkles around his eyes. Tiffany was flawless as always. Neat hair, fresh makeup, elegant black dress. Ethan was holding a drawing that he clearly wanted to show his grandmother. Hi, Mom. Brandon hugged me and kissed my cheek. How are you doing? Where's Aunt Doris? She's in the kitchen working on dessert. Come on in, sit down. Tiffany glanced around the living room, as if checking to see if anything had changed since her last visit. Her eyes lingered for a moment on the table in the hallway, where the red bag still lay. I noticed a subtle look of satisfaction on her face. Grandma, look what I drew. Ethan handed me a piece of paper with a picture of a house surrounded by trees. This is your house, and that's me and you on the porch. That's a beautiful drawing, honey. I'll put it on the refrigerator. Where are Mom and Dad in the picture? Tiffany asked. They're at the store, Ethan answered seriously. And Grandma and I are at home eating cookies. Doris came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. She greeted Brandon warmly, Tiffany politely but discreetly. My children always sensed their sister's attitude toward their sister-in-law. How was your trip? Not too tired? Doris asked Brandon. It was okay, no traffic. How are you? It's been a while. Oh, same old, same old. Pension, grandkids, vegetable garden, the life of an old man. Doris looked meaningfully at Tiffany. We went to the table. I sat Tiffany so that her back was to the hallway, and I sat across from her where I could see the red bag. I wanted to watch my sister-in-law's reaction when we got to the main topic. For the first half hour, the conversation was about everyday things. Brandon talked about work. Ethan talked about school. Tiffany shared news from the real estate agency. I served the food and played the role of hospitable hostess, but inwardly I was preparing myself for the crucial part of the evening. Mom, the chicken is great, Brandon said. Just like when I was a kid. Thank you, son. I try to keep the family tradition alive. After all, home is where memories are made. Of course, Tiffany agreed, although sometimes traditions have to be changed. As time goes on, circumstances change. She began to probe. Apparently, she was planning to talk about moving back to the residence. Yes, some things do change, Doris said thoughtfully. For example, sometimes people aren't what they seem. Tiffany glanced at her, but didn't say anything. By the way, Rachel, Doris continued, did you tell Brandon about your visit to the police? Brandon almost choked on his wine. The police? Mom, what happened? You didn't say anything. Just a little misunderstanding, I said calmly. Someone made an anonymous call saying there might be drugs in my house. Tiffany froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. A look of surprise appeared on her face, but I noticed her shoulders tense. Drugs? Brandon interjected. That's absurd. Who would say that? I was surprised, I said, keeping my eyes on Tiffany. But, the best part is that when I checked my red bag, there was a bag of white powder in it. Tiffany put down her fork. Her face turned pale, but she tried to remain calm. How, how, how is that possible? She asked in a shaky voice. That's what I was trying to figure out, I answered, until Ethan helped me. The boy raised his head from his plate. What did I help? You told me that you saw Mom put something in my bag when you came to visit last Monday. In the silence that ensued, the ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece could be heard. Brandon slowly turned to his wife. Tiffany, is it true? Of course not, she answered too quickly. It's, it's nonsense. Ethan must have gotten something mixed up. Children sometimes fantasize. I'm not fantasizing. The boy was outraged. I saw you take a white bag out of your pocket and put it in Grandma's bag. And then you told Aunt Sharon on the phone that they were bad pills. Brandon looked at his wife with growing horror. Tiffany, explain to me what's going on. Brandon, you don't believe this nonsense, do you? Tiffany tried to smile, but it was a crooked smile. Your mom's, obviously. Well, at her age, sometimes there are mental changes, and the kid's just repeating what she's instilled in him. I didn't indoctrinate him, I said firmly. Ethan himself called me on Saturday night when you were at the store. He was afraid that the bad pills would get Grandma taken away from home. That's true, Dad, Ethan confirmed. I heard Mom say that the cops would find the pills at Grandma's house, and then everyone would know Grandma was sick. Doris pulled a piece of paper out of her purse. Brandon, I wrote down your son's statement word for word. He told not only how Tiffany planted the drugs, but how she discussed the plan with his sister over the phone. Tiffany, Brandon's voice turned cold. Tell me straight. Did you put drugs in Mom's bag? No, of course not. Brandon, how can you ask me that? I'm your wife. Then explain to me why there was a bag of cocaine in that bag. How would I know? Maybe your mother put it there herself and forgot about it. At her age, that's entirely possible. Don't you talk about my mother like that, Brandon exploded. I stood up and took the container with the bag of drugs out of the kitchen. This was the bag I found in my bag. It had been carefully tucked under the lining so that it wouldn't be visible in normal use, but would definitely be found during a search. Tiffany looked at the bag like it was a snake. I turned it over to the police, I continued. Detective Morris said planting drugs was a serious criminal offense. They've already started an investigation. What? What are they going to do? Tiffany whispered. Check the phone records of your conversations with your sister. They'll try to determine where you got the drugs from. Interview witnesses to your behavior in recent weeks. Doris opened her notebook. And we have detailed records of all your visits and phone calls. How you researched the house, asked about valuables, suggested an appraiser. How you persuaded Rachel to move into the residence. It all perfectly illustrates your motives. Brandon, Tiffany turned to her husband with despair in her eyes. You're not going to believe these accusations? I'm your wife. I'm the mother of your son. Brandon stared at her in silence. His gaze was filled with pain, disappointment, and growing understanding. Tiffany, tell me the truth, for the last time. Did you plant the drugs? She tried to hold his gaze for a few seconds, but then she lowered her eyes. Yeah, I was thinking about your well-being, our well-being. Your mother's getting old. She can't live alone in a house this big anymore. Sooner or later, something will happen. Then it's true, Brandon said quietly. You really did it. I didn't mean to hurt her. I just wanted to show her that she needed help. She'd be better off in the residence, safer. Shut up, Brandon exploded. Just shut up. You drugged my mother. You were willing to send her to jail or a mental hospital for a house and money. Not for the money, for us, for our future. What future? Brandon got up from the table. You're a criminal. You were willing to destroy my mother for your own gain. Tiffany jumped up too. What's wrong with me thinking about our family, about what Ethan's gonna get? Your mother isn't forever, and that house is worth $500,000. That's it. I stood up and looked her straight in the eye. You're finally telling the truth. You want my house. And you were willing to do anything to get it. Rachel, you don't understand. At your age. At my age, I'm smart enough to spot people like you. You thought you were dealing with a helpless old lady who could be fooled, but you miscalculated. Doris pulled out her cell phone. Shouldn't we call the police right away? They're going to need to take a statement in front of witnesses anyway. No, Tiffany rushed to the door. I'm not staying here and listening to these accusations. Stop, Brandon yelled. You're not going anywhere. We have a lot more to talk about. About what? About how much your family hates me? About how you're willing to believe any lie to get rid of me? Lies? Brandon grabbed his wife's hand. You just admitted it yourself. Tiffany broke free and ran out of the house. A few seconds later, we heard a car start and drive away with a screech of tires. In the silence that followed, Brandon sank into a chair and covered his face with his hands. Mom, I'm so sorry. God, what I've gotten myself into. Ethan walked over to his father and tentatively touched his shoulder. Dad, is Mom coming back? Brandon lifted his head and looked at his son. I don't know, Ethan. I don't. Will Grandma stay in her house? Yes, honey, I answered. Grandma will stay in her house. We spent the rest of the evening in heavy conversations. Brandon was trying to figure out how long his wife had been planning her scheme, and I was telling him about all the oddities of her behavior in recent months. Doris helped analyze the legal aspects of the situation. "What's going to happen now?" Brandon asked. "The police will investigate," I answered. "Then we'll see." But in any case, Tiffany would never come back to this house again. And Ethan? Ethan is always welcome. He's my grandson, and I love him. Around 11 p.m., Brandon got ready to go home. "Mom, I'm sorry again. I should have realized what was going on." "Son, it's not your fault you married a cheater. It's only your fault for believing her for too long. What am I supposed to do now?" "Get a divorce. And think about how to give Ethan a normal childhood." After they left, Doris and I sat in the kitchen for a long time, discussing the day's events. "Are you happy?" my sister asked. "Not happy, just calm. Justice had been served." "And Brandon?" "Brandon will survive. He's stronger than he looks. And Ethan? Ethan will visit his grandmother often." "And Tiffany?" I looked out the window at the dark street. Tiffany would get what she deserved. Sooner or later. The house fell into silence again, but now it was a good silence, a silence of safety and peace. My red bag lay on the table, freed from other people's cargo, and I sat in my favorite chair in the house that was still mine. Tiffany had lost, and I didn't feel an ounce of pity for her.